Well, hey folks, how are you? What's going on? How is everything? Sorry, I'm a little bit late. A quick meeting ran over, but we're all good. And it is just me today. I'm so sorry that you don't get me and Aaron, but hopefully you will still enjoy everything I have to say. Hold on 1 minute. I am just making sure that something is going on here. Hello. Yeah, so let me know where you're coming in from in the comments. Hello, replay crew. We always love to know where you are and what's going on. We've got a full slate today to talk about and some stuff with the World Cup, a little update over the Taylor Swift ticket drama, which we were definitely a part of the week before Thanksgiving, and some really fun news about a new housing initiative happening in Philadelphia that I can't wait to tell you guys about. So, without further ado, let's go. All right, here we go. So, the first thing that I want to really quickly talk about is this whole thing around armband protests and political action at the World Cup. So, this story came out last week in particular, which is that Germany players, at their game, their first game, which I can't remember who they played first. I apologize, but their first game was all about like they couldn't wear. I'm sorry, I should rewind. Let me rewind because you may or may not even know what's happening here. So let me remove this really quickly. So here's the deal, and this is part of our not new news. So FIFA, the Federation of Football, has decided. Well, I mean, they've been maintaining for like a decade that sports aren't political, which is hilarious, and completely factually untrue. But they also banned any form of player protest at the World Cup, including a whole bunch of OneLove armbands that captains across the teams were planning on wearing, and the captains wear armbands in football. Um, that protested the fact that homosexuality is illegal in the country of Qatar. And right before the World Cup, I mean, and a bunch of teams announced this like months and months ago that they were going to do it. And then, like 2 days before the World Cup kicked off, FIFA came out and they were like, oh, if you wear one of these bands, your captain will get a yellow card, which essentially means that their captain would be out of group stage play, realistically, in some ways. And like, come on, it's so nonsense that to make it like if you want FIFA, if you want football to not be political, then you also you can't silence political protesting, because the silencing of it is a major problem. So there's been a lot of different. There was a guy who ran out in the field yesterday wearing a support Ukraine top, flag with a rainbow flag in his hand and a support Iranian women on his back. Like this has been. It's like as soon as FIFA started being like absolutely not, you can't do anything, everyone's like, hold my beer. And the first people to do that were the German national team, who, when they were posing on television for their team photo right before the match, they did this and they made statements on their Instagram that they covered their mouths because FIFA was silencing them. The Denmark National Football Federation is also planning on talking to FIFA after the World Cup about, I think, like even future participation and what's going on. There is lots and lots of teams who are very, very upset with FIFA's policy. The United States government, even this past week, tweeted out, some stuff about the match we're about to play with Iran in an hour. and they intentionally left off the Iranian flag in a symbol of solidarity with the women who are protesting in Iran. And Iran freaked out about it, and the White House was like, "Oh, so sorry. You should really let your women. You should really stop killing your women over doing hijabs." So all of that is happening. I think the protests are really interesting. I think I hope they do something. This is the most momentum behind a protest that we've ever had. This is also the first country where homosexuality is like outright illegal. We know it is not illegal in Russia, but it's still a real problem. And so the last World Cup, it wasn't quite as a big deal. Like, you can get executed for a same-sex relationship in Qatar. And so this is just this whole other level. Like, if you don't want politics into your games, then don't put them somewhere that's so political. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Let me know, have you been watching the matches? Are you completely boycotting? Has trying to watch World Cup soccer this time of year completely drained your love of it? My brother, who is a massive, massive soccer fan, played it himself. We're big Liverpool supporters. He's not into it at all. He was just in my office telling me that. He's not into it at all. And we think it's the time of year. Like, in the summer, you can kind of like have it on in the background of work because work's a little slower. December in manufacturing, you absolutely cannot take your eye off your work at any point in time for even a minute. And so this just isn't fun. And I'm certainly watching it a lot more half-heartedly than I thought I would. Still making a donation to Amnesty every time I watch a game in my small protest of them holding it in Qatar. But we're going to remember this World Cup for a lot of reasons, and not all of them are good.
Ride with me if you ride with me. You can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky. Come get high with me.
All right, so here's the next one really quick. We're in the institutions will always protect themselves segment. I'm going to switch the screen up. Yeah, does that work? How do we feel about that? That's a little bit weird. How do we feel about that? Let me know. So you may remember this, or you may not remember this. I don't know. But there was a terrible Katie Meyer was a soccer player at the University of Stanford University, whatever it is, Stanford University, who died by suicide in March of 2022 after she got a letter in like after hours. I think it was quite late at night. That she was being subjected to disciplinary hearing for an incident that had happened 6 months previous, where she accidentally spilled coffee on a football player. And the football player was, I guess, like aggrieved in some way. The football player in question was somebody who had allegedly recently sexually assaulted a freshman member of the soccer team and who received no known investigation whatsoever, and who the Title IX office declined to take action against. But Katie got a letter, an email letting her know that this action could put her graduation in jeopardy, her scholarship, and her play on the soccer team, and her essentially ability to go to law school in the future. And her parents are saying that put her at such a acute crisis reaction that she died by suicide, like immediately. For years, honestly, probably decades now, Stanford has gotten a lot of flack for being far too punitive on some of its students and not others. Stanford University is also the home of the famous Brock Turner case. And while that was a legal system, Stanford still allowed a lot of his behavior to happen. And so they are a particular university that is super into protecting the people that they see as valuable. So they're male athletes. Katie's family has now filed a lawsuit on wrongful death, claiming that Stanford's handling of a disciplinary process led to her death, directly alleging that the actions that led to her death began and ended with Stanford University. So we've got this article from Sports Illustrated in the show notes. Also, if you are a listener of the Gist podcast, which I recommend highly, it's twice a week, and it's sports with a lady focus, which I appreciate. They covered this extensively this morning on the podcast as well. So if you're looking for more updates, that's what's going on. And the second institution that we're talking about today that will always protect itself is the country of China. Now, the word, the China and protests don't often go together. There is not a lot of protests in China, authoritarian dictatorship, et cetera, et cetera. No, AP, I've already joined you. Thank you so much. But in the last couple weeks, there have been a lot of protests. We've got two articles, one from the Globe and Mail in Canada, and one from the Associated Press, explaining that after that, the Chinese government's treatment of COVID in particular, their zero COVID policy and how it has impacted the economy, has changed the game for a lot of people. So in Shanghai, demonstrators and police clashed on Sunday. Stocks and oil slid sharply as the rare protests worried the management of this zero policy. During the weekend, protesters in cities including Wuhan and Langzhou overturned testing facilities. Students gathered on campuses. Actions were sparked by anger over an apartment fire late last week in the western city of Urumqi that killed 10 people that were all in isolation. The deadly fires fueled speculation that COVID-19 curbs in the city, and that city had been under lockdown for 100 days, had hindered escape and rescue. In the early hours of Monday, one group chanted, "We don't want COVID tests, we want freedom." This is a lot. This is a lot. I think a zero COVID policy is insane because you can't ever have any zero disease policy ever. One of my favorite kind of jokey things about this is that they locked everybody inside Shanghai Disneyland for like 2 days while they literally tested everybody. They wouldn't let anyone leave until they had a negative COVID test. And so people were like sleeping on the ground. The park ran out of food. Like, we should also note this is a lot of Gen Zers and that are leading these protests. And I will just kind of calmly say that the youth have always known how to get around China's internet policies. So I'm not surprised that they are also the ones that are asking for a treatment that is more in line with how maybe more in line with how the rest of the world is handling COVID. Because medically, I think any medicine person would tell you a zero COVID policy is insane. But friend of the show, Megan Eves, who is a China expert in terms of travel, especially maybe not geopolitics, has been tweeting about this a lot and just asking all of us in the West to really look at it and understand how absolutely groundbreaking and revolutionary this is, that the Chinese people are en masse acting against their government. First time this has really ever happened in this way against this particular government. This is really intense. So definitely keep your eye on it because I think it's only going to, honestly, it's only going to increase from here. So on our next segment, we're going to talk about why representation matters. I knock it down like boom, 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 boom. I knock it down like... All right. So this comes to us from Erin, who is currently traversing her way across the Pennsylvania Turnpike because we have the privilege of teaching some great nursery school workers, daycare, pre-primary school workers tonight at the Learning Experience in Doylestown. We're very, very excited about it. So she just wanted you guys to know that there's a Netflix animated show about an Indigenous family called Spirit Rangers, and that the pioneering Native actors Wes Studi and Tantu Cardinal are the ones who star. This is really, really great because they're elders in their own Indigenous communities, and they're also going to be playing elders on the screen. And so just once again, every time we can see ourselves on screen in positive lights, it's really helpful to self-esteem and to senses of self. One of the more groundbreaking movies, I think, of our lifetime that no one talks about as groundbreaking is the movie Drumline, which is what introduced a whole lot of non-Black folks to the concept of a college drumline. And 20 years after the movie came out, starred Nick Cannon, who is now a Punchline for fathering a lot of children, but at one point was a pop culture phenomenon. Historically, Black colleges and universities credit the film for boosting visibility and asking people to join and having people join the drumline. More drumline festivals and shows have certainly happened since the film. And if you have not seen the early 2000s classic Drumline, honestly can't recommend it enough, especially if you're in the mood for a feel-good, competition-based movie. Drumline is absolutely one of the best. I adore it. And it's one of those like poppy field movies. Like every time it's on TV, I just get drawn into it, like the proverbial poppy fields in Wizard of Oz. So can't recommend it highly enough. So yeah, those are two really positive ways of representation, reminding us, as always, that people should tell the stories that they know, and that we can always use more stories that represent the full human experience. So Drumline and Spirit Ranger are both really good examples of that. Now, there are also examples in this world of why we can't have nice things. And so here we go. All right. So this week, in what should surprise, honestly, no one, the London Fire Brigade has released a report that says it is institutionally misogynist and racist. It's a review of the culture that was established by the London Fire Commissioner after a trainee firefighter died by suicide in August of 2020. At the time, the guy, the commissioner, Andy Rose, said there's no place for discrimination, harassment, and bullying in the brigade. And a whole lot of people are like, and yet my life. So the review was conducted by the former chief crown prosecutor, Nazir Afzal, who I believe, if I've read the Chiron correctly, this is himself after talking to the BBC after talking about it. It's a toxic culture, and it's led to several firefighters dying by suicide throughout their history, and it's a major problem. So kudos to the London Fire Brigade for commissioning this report. Now let's see what they do about it. We will certainly keep our eye on it as much as BBC lets us, and I'm sure you guys will be too, as much as we draw to your attention. But this is likely everywhere. We see this about police departments and EMT brigades, places that were institutionally male, especially white male driven for a really long time, and had very, very narrow ideas of power and rightness and like a good cultural fit. This kind of thing happens a lot. And so hearing from folks that are stepping up and saying like, actually here, let's shed the light on what's going on and let's make it better. I think this is really exciting. And maybe we can get some change from this, and then they can show up in our next segment, Accountability Corner. Okay, so did any of you wait in the queue for Taylor Swift tickets? Was it just Aaron and me? Because I was in it for 5.5 hours. And thankfully, I could just let it go on my phone, and it kind of went. And we're not a horror story. There's a lot of other people that are absolute horror stories. Excuse me. And one of the reasons that it's so bad is that Live Nation and Ticketmaster, two giant, massive companies, and basically the people that control all of the ticketing in the United States, were allowed to merge. And they shouldn't have been. It's a massive monopoly. It violates antitrust laws. Their merger should have never been approved by the FTC. So now the Department of Justice of the United States government is probing Live Nation and Ticketmaster for antitrust violations. And this was brought about after the Taylor Swift stuff, because a whole lot of people took to Twitter and to their representatives' phone lines calling for a government investigation into Ticketmaster. Because just the absolute, unmitigated, there's no other way to get tickets for anything. Like anything. The fees are insane. There's no other way to do it. And it's maddening. It's maddening. Because even like Broadway.com is powered by Ticketmaster like software. And so you're still paying the same amount of fees. Like, it's just really, really maddening. And we've had antitrust laws in the United States since the early 1900s, when we broke up things like the Rockefellers and the Chases and prevented the robber barons from really taking over. Antitrust legislation is one of the last stops of any sort of regulation in capitalism. And this is something that needs to be investigated shortly. The merge was approved in 2010 under certain conditions that had to be met by 2020. And 2020, the FTC at the time was not particularly interested in holding anyone accountable. So they let the merger just become finalized in 2020 when that should not have happened. So we're excited that maybe this giant company that is just raking in profit after profit on the back of all of us who are just trying to have a good time will actually be held accountable to the laws of the land that are already on our books. Because sometimes that actually happens. Isn't that exciting? Just utterly wild. Utterly wild. So the next segment, I'm realizing we don't have a fun little clip for it. I'll have to talk to Erin about that because she is the one who makes all of these absolutely delightful little clips. But we're going to talk about this crazy story that came out. This is the Food and Wine coverage of the literal, like the religion behind Sleepytime Tea, which you may or may not know about. I don't know. Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. The guy who created Celestial Seasonings, which is the company that makes Sleepytime Tea, is actually the founder of a new age offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, which is, and this little offshoot is by some people referred to as a cult. It's called Arantia, and they have some very interesting beliefs about the planet. So for anyone listening, my face is doing a lot of things right now because I'm trying to talk about this very respectfully, and I struggle. This is one of those groups of thought that I struggle to be really respectful about. But this whole system that they believe existed and exists now is based on certain types of racial superiority, and it also involves eugenics and aliens and a whole lot of other things. So there's some questions about when you buy Sleepytime, where does your money go? Things like that, because the person who owns Celestial Seasonings is still quite involved in this movement. But honestly, it's so like, are you kidding me? Humans. Please read the article for yourself. It also, this article that we have in here, which is from Food and Wine, also has it links to the full article that this reporter did in an online magazine called Van Winkle's. It's utterly fascinating. So give it, humans are just wild and you never know the stories behind things. That's pretty much my summary of the situation. And now we're going to wrap things up today by talking about good vibes only. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Guys, what incredible news. A Cree woman has been crowned Miss World Canada for the very first time. So excited that a First Nations woman is now representing Canada on this world stage of this way. I don't care what you feel about pageants. I don't care what you think. They're important to a lot of people and they're important about representation. And so having a First Nations person in them is awesome. And we are so excited. Congratulations to Emma Morrison, who will represent Canada in the 72nd Miss World competition in 2023. And how incredible. So excited for her. Great job. Great job, Miss World Canada. So excited for you to represent our neighbors to the north. The next one is really exciting, obviously for my own hometown of Philly, is that we've been approved of a tiny house to transition houseless residents into permanent housing. I got into a really long conversation with my aunt about this and explained that one of the things I really like about this model is that it creates community, and everyone who is in houseless in some way, shape, or form is living in some state of isolation, whether they have another community of houseless people, which is wonderful. They're living in isolation from the rest of society. And we know that isolation is one of the psychological ills that is really, really, really hard to overcome. There's also like these houses can be training wheels for people that haven't cared for a physical space for a long time, the same physical space for a long time. They'll be able to receive social services, which is great. They'll have accountability and make sure that they're not just like turned out into the world and said, okay, figure out how to do this now. Everyone who is transitioning from one major life event to another needs training wheels. College is designed to be training wheels between adolescence and adulthood, for instance. And people in trauma don't get training wheels back into reality. And so really, really excited for this model, really excited for this to be happening. I know of a great neighborhood that's also like this down in Austin, Texas, that is doing incredible work. So I'm stoked to see it. It's going to be in the Northeast section, which is not far from here, where my factory is. And I will tell you, this is a perfect space for it. So really excited to see what's going on. In good hockey news, which is something we don't say a lot on this show, so revel in it. The first all-trans hockey tournament was named a crowding success. Really excited about it. It was in Madison, Wisconsin this past weekend. And they have a whole Twitter account. They held their first draft tournament. The hockey was fantastic. All of this stuff. This also leads directly into the great news that the rivalry series between Team Canada and USA has led for all-time attendance records and all-time viewing records. So some really, really exciting news that we both get, that we are continuing in multiple ways that we can to make sure that hockey is actually for everyone. And finally, from friend of the show, Cheryl Leung, we find out that Trayvon Martin's flight suit will be displayed at the Smithsonian Museum of African American History. For anyone who doesn't know, Trayvon was he dreamed of becoming an astronaut. And he attended Experience Aviation, which is like a space camp, in his early teens before he was murdered by George Zimmerman. And the fact that like at this exhibit about the broad impact and spectrum of Afrofuturism, which is a super fancy title, the main exhibit of that exhibit is going to be Chadwick Boseman's suit from the first Black Panther. And so to have Trayvon's real life flight suit in that exhibit, I think is so beautiful and really representing what Afrofuturism, the movement of Afrofuturism is about what can be and what, honestly should be in a lot of ways. And dreams of future and excitement like that. So God, we're stoked. We've been meaning to do a work trip, take you guys with us down to that museum. And hopefully in 23, we'll be able to do that. We are waiting as well for the African American experience, like the Slavery Museum, to open in Charleston, and we'll be taking you guys with us on video when we get to do that one too. So lots of really exciting stuff coming up at various museums. We talked last week that museums are kind of weird for us. We don't always understand their purpose, especially when you're displaying colonized artifacts. But museums like this that really seek to restore dignity or tell stories that we don't get everywhere, we think are really important and really exciting. It's why we always see, there's a word I shouldn't use anymore, why we always promote as much as possible the Museum of the American Revolution here in Philadelphia, as well as the Irish Folklore Museum, the Irish Leprechaun Museum, which is folklore in Dublin, and the Epic Museum in Dublin, which is about an authentic immigrant experience, the Ulster Folk Park in Omagh, County Tyrone, Northern Ireland. These are just some of the museums that we know are about creating holistic experience. The Mayborn Museum in Waco, Texas. Experiences that seek to rewrite stories that we may have heard and maybe even seek to decolonize international narratives. So I can't think of a better way to end than on Trayvon's suit. Really exciting stuff. So this is our last thing we're doing in November of 2022, which is insane. I can't believe that we've made it to November. Excuse me. Been a couple late nights for me at Abbey Research HQ. December is a bit of a marathon around here for sure. So just a reminder that coming up next on our YouTube will be our the debut on Thursday of The Crown Season 5. Our coverage of it. I will tell you, we have some feelings with capital Fs. If you would like all of the crown as much as possible and as much of us as possible, make sure to join our Patreon, which is recently relaunching with 3 tiers. We have a pub tier, which will get you access to all the bonus content. It's like come down to the pub and have a chat. The parlor tier, which is come on over to our house really quickly. Let's hang out for a little bit, kind of chat. That will get you some early access videos. And then we have the porch, which is come on over, grab a glass of sweet tea, take your time. That's $10. And that includes everything in the 7 and 5, but also hangout times with us, watch alongs together, trying to seek ways to build this community because we love you guys so much and we love having fun. If you're here on the YouTube, we would love for you to join us for the Patreon as well, and get to know us a little bit over there too, and let us get to know you. We would love to have that happen. Also coming up is our holiday movie coverage. We'll be starting off with a coverage of 2 movies that dealt with Hollywood behind the scenes content. And we liked a whole heck of a lot in this first video. Can't wait for you to see them. So in the meantime, whatever December needs to be for you, whether it needs to be full of family or full of productivity, or it be beginning the wind down professionally, whatever December needs to look like for you, we hope that's what it looks like. Dr. Aaron will be back with me next week. I know you're thrilled. So we'll see you guys then. Bye.